Welcome to another training scenario offered to you by the North Carolina Department of Insurance Office of State Fire Marshal. Today we're in another segment of Ask Vince. Have you ever found yourself when you're rappelling to be rappelling down a mountain and all of a sudden you find yourself at a knot? Vince, has that ever happened to you?
Well, I can't say it's ever happened to me that I just found myself at a knot, but if you knew in advance your ropes weren't long enough and you had to splice two ropes together using a tracer aid or a barrel knot or some other similar way of joining two ropes together, then that could be a real problem. And when you get to this, you've got to figure out a way that you're going to pass this knot. We're going to try and demonstrate one simple way of doing that today, utilizing the figure 8 plate. I started my rappel using a triple wrap Prusik as a self belay. I've also got a blue line, which is a belay, which could actually take care of eliminating this, but for today's purposes we're going to demonstrate it using the triple wrap Prusik. Once you get to this place and you've locked off, since I've got a secondary line, I could elect to lock this off, or I could elect to just leave it as it is. Just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to demonstrate locking this off, coming across and setting it. I'm only going to do one because I've got myself as close as possible to the knot, because you can see having to deal with this and having to reattach the 8 plate below the knot, it's going to create some slack, and I've got to drop, and I've got to raise myself back up to take myself off the initial Prusik, which is acting as a belay. So once I've got to this point, I'm locked off. I'm actually going to get everything configured. I've got all the equipment I need. I've got a couple of extra carabiners. I've got a second Prusik which can come in real handy for us getting myself back up off. I'm going to take this and actually unlock it, and I'm going to allow it to pass up through. And the reason for this is I've got to take the load off, and I've just transferred my load off of the 8 plate, and 100% of my load is being carried by this triple wrap Prusik sling. That allows me to unlock this carabiner, and I'm actually going to take it completely off of my 8 plate. You have to pay attention to what you're doing when you're out here working on the edge, because it would be very easy to drop something, and if you drop it, then that's just a piece of equipment that's going to be gone. You're not going to be able to retrieve it, so you better have what you need with you, and pay attention to detail so that you don't drop something like that. But I'm going to take this and I'm going to apply it as close to the knot as possible. I don't want to drop myself any lower than I absolutely have to, and once I've got to this point, I'm going to reattach it. And of course, very importantly, I'm going to lock that carabiner off. Now, the 8 plate is configured and ready to go. The problem is I'm going to have to drop my weight to a point where I can actually load my harness again instead of loading this Prusik. So I'm going to go ahead and configure this in a locked configuration so that anything that was to happen in the process of that transfer, I would still be safetied off. I've got all that secured. Now my next problem is trying to figure out how in the world I'm going to get down below this. Okay? And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to take a second Prusik sling, and you can lock this one above because I'm actually just going to be stepping in it so that I can loosen the first one. It doesn't actually have to be below where I'm going to be traveling. If I was able to place it below, if I'd allowed myself enough room, I could continue to use that as a secondary means of belay. And at this point, of course, I want to dress this Prusik sling down and make sure that it's dress right dress. And there we have it. Okay. From this point, I'm actually going to step into this Prusik sling, and I'm going to check and see if it's going to allow me the amount that I need. And there you have it. My load is now on the red Prusik sling. I'm going to loosen the green and lower it down this point right here. I'm afraid that it's probably not going to allow me to make it to where I can transfer the load. But I'm going to try it anyway. We're going to see if I can transfer my load over to my harness. Okay, it's still a little bit tight. I don't have enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reposition this one actually above the first one to allow me more lift, and it gives me a little more travel in this green sling so that I can bring that green prusik down closer, and it should release to the point that I can take it out of the system. Again, I'm just going to take and place my foot into that loop. I'm going to step up, and that's allowed me to release the green prusik and come down even further. And I'm going to try and put my load onto my harness. As you can see, there's no load on this green prusik. This is still locked off, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my belay line, which is through a second carabiner. I'm never unhooked from both carabiners at the same time. And I'm going to open the gate and release myself from that. Okay? These are still above the knot. Now at this point, I'm going to lock my belay line since I have one. I'm going to lock that carabiner back down. Both carabiners are locked. My figure 8's locked. Everything's in place. I'm going to untie the knot. And from this point, you always want to make sure you control this lower end right here. You never ever want to let go of this lower end when you're unlocking, because you're going to transfer the load and you can start traveling. At this time, I'm going to take and pull like the hands of a clock are pointing out. I'm going to pull away and I'm going to pull this down. That took the first lock out. When I take the second lock out, it's going to be a little bit harder. So I get it positioned behind the ear, and with both hands I'm going to make a sharp tug, and then I'm going to place my hand behind my back. Right there. Now I've transferred my load from above the knot to below the knot, and I'm ready to rappel. If at this point I wanted to utilize a self belay with one of the prusiks, it would be as simple as just locking off again. And then putting the prusik on. And again, this is going to hook into a secondary carabiner, which my belay line is in. If I wasn't using this, I could just take another carabiner and attach it either to my chest point if I was wearing a class 3 harness, or a separate one into this one right here. And again, I'm going to lock it. Now what I've basically accomplished is I've got two belays. I've got the prusik belay, I've got my blue rope as a belay, and I've actually got this. Prior to unlocking, since I have this belay in place, I'm going to set it, and then I'm going to unlock, and then I'm going to mine the prusik. On the ground,